It is clear from recent international events that Turkey's role on the global stage has been nothing short of dramatic. Over the past years, this medium-sized nation has managed to defy traditional expectations in diplomacy and regional conflicts. Despite its relatively modest size, Turkey has challenged nearly every major power through a series of bold and sometimes paradoxical moves. Whether it is in its dealings in Syria, its provocative actions toward European leaders, or its seemingly contradictory alliances with both Russia and the West, Turkey has consistently managed to extract advantages even when facing considerable risks. In Syria, for example, Turkey once shot down a Russian aircraft. This unprecedented move, coming from a nation that is also a NATO member, sent shockwaves across international diplomatic circles. In the same period, while publicly challenging Moscow's stance, Turkey simultaneously went on to purchase Russia's S-400 missile defense system, in defiance of warnings from the United States. These actions stirred intense debate about Turkey's commitment to its alliances and its pursuit of national interests over strict ideological alignment. At the same time, Turkey's behavior toward Europe has been equally complex. Turkish leaders have not hesitated to criticize European politicians directly. In one notable instance, the former German chancellor was labeled an adversary by Turkey, with calls for Turkish citizens of German descent to withhold their votes for Hyman interference in another nation's internal affairs that inevitably led to diplomatic strains. Later on, when matters regarding NATO's role in Sweden became contentious, Turkey imposed further obstacles, making it difficult for the European side to take a consistent stance. Despite the traditional international relations theories suggesting that such behavior should result in isolation or even collective sanctions, reality has shown a more nuanced picture. While Turkey faces criticism on multiple fronts, its economic ties with China have grown closer, and from a U.S. perspective, many observers note that Turkey's involvement in large-scale infrastructure and trade endeavors positions it as a strategic linchpin in what is commonly viewed as China's Belt and Road Initiative directed toward Europe. In parallel, the Turkish leadership has maintained remarkably warm personal ties with Russia. President Erdogan, in particular, is one of the very few world leaders who simultaneously enjoy personal relationships with both Vladimir Putin and, more recently, with Ukrainian leaders. Meanwhile, after a phone call between former U.S. President Trump and President Erdogan, steps were initiated to ease American sanctions on Turkey. Even in the wake of severe domestic crackdowns on anti-government protests, many European governments refrained from openly condemning Turkey's record on human rights or its democratic backsliding, highlighting the geopolitical paradox at play. This paradox raises a central question: how does Turkey manage to maintain such an unpredictable foreign policy? Is it merely a case of opportunism, or is it the result of a carefully calculated strategy? A closer look reveals that Turkey's complex diplomatic maneuvers are grounded in three fundamental dimensions. First, Turkey possesses a multifaceted political identity. It is a Muslim-majority nation that upholds secular democratic traditions, a member of NATO, a leading voice among Turkic-speaking nations, and a modern successor to the Ottoman legacy. This unique combination allows Turkey to shift its identity according to the context and the audience. Second, Turkey's geographical position provides it with distinct strategic advantages. Positioned as a bridge between Europe and Asia, and as the gatekeeper to the Black Sea through the Bosporus Strait, its location is critical both economically and militarily. Lastly, President Erdogan's mastery of what might be called dual-track diplomacy, the art of simultaneously balancing domestic political imperatives with international ambitions, has enabled him to harness nationalistic sentiment to support bold foreign policy initiatives. At its core, this strategic approach reflects a gradual redefinition of Turkey's founding principles, particularly the Kemalist tradition. In recent years, Turkey has increasingly distanced itself from being perceived as a subordinate of the Western order. While it has also resisted a complete pivot to the Eastern sphere, Turkey is working to establish itself as an independent power in a multipolar world. An audacious goal has been set by 2053, coinciding with the 600th anniversary of the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople, Turkey aspires to have evolved into a world power with significant influence over international rules and order. Political scientists often describe this ambition as Neo-Ottomanism. The following narrative explores how Turkey uses its multifaceted identity, strategic geographic location, and finely tuned balancing of domestic and international politics to navigate relationships with various major powers, all in the pursuit of this grand vision. Turkey's ties with Russia provide a vivid example of the complexities at play. For centuries, the histories of the Ottoman and Russian empires have been intertwined in a tapestry of conflict and occasional cooperation. From 1676 to 1878, the two empires fought in 10 wars, and this prolonged series of conflicts has left deep historical scars and a sense of enmity that still resonates. Even during the Cold War, Turkey's membership in NATO put it at direct odds with the Soviet Union, while its geographical location kept it on the front line of any potential confrontation. To this day, Turkey hosts a nuclear weapons facility on its territorial site that lies only a few hundred kilometers from the Russian border. Despite being part of NATO, Turkey has charted its own path in confronting Russia. While Turkish drones have been used by Ukraine against Russian forces, Turkey has avoided joining Western-led economic sanctions against Moscow. Moreover, President Erdogan has sustained a cordial personal relationship with President Putin, illustrated by numerous high-level meetings that sometimes took place in Turkey itself during early peace negotiations involving Russia and its adversaries. Questions arise as to whether Turkey is playing both sides or acting according to a more deliberate plan. In recent years, Turkish-Russian relations have been shaped by several pivotal incidents, one of the most notable occurring in 2015. Turkey's Air Force shot down a Russian fighter jet amid the Syrian conflict, in which Russia backed the Assad government while Turkey supported certain opposition groups near the Turkish-Syrian border. Turkish officials asserted that the Russian plane had breached Turkish airspace for 17 seconds despite repeated warnings. Russia, by contrast, insisted there was no airspace violation and suggested that its jet had been investigating alleged illicit oil transactions involving ISIS and elements within Turkey. To make matters worse, reports indicated that one of the Russian pilots was killed after parachuting, apparently shot by ground forces. Russia responded primarily through economic sanctions and retaliatory strikes against rebel factions in Syria. Yet, wary of Turkey's NATO status, Moscow refrained from direct military revenge. That confrontation ignited a lengthy struggle between the two powers over influence in Syria. By November 2024, Turkish-backed rebel forces mounted a rapid offensive, capturing the city of Damascus within 2 weeks and forcing Russian troops to withdraw entirely from Syria. The removal of Russian forces marked the end of Moscow's long-standing military presence in the Middle East, a development that signified the collapse of a legacy of influence dating back to Soviet times. Turkey, in turn, emerged as the major external supporter of the Syrian opposition. For those who argue that the Middle East was beyond Russia's sphere of influence, a look at areas closer to Russia's border offers a different perspective. The Nagorno-Karabakh region, predominantly Armenian in population but widely recognized internationally as belonging to Azerbaijan, has been a flashpoint since the Soviet Union's dissolution. Russia has traditionally backed Christian-majority Armenia through the Collective Security Treaty Organization CSTO, while Turkey supports majority Turkic Azerbaijan. Their cooperation was formalized in a defense agreement that, despite Azerbaijan's smaller military compared to Armenia, gave Baku a decisive edge. With Russia preoccupied by its conflict in Ukraine, Azerbaijan seized the moment in 2023. Bolstered by Turkey's backing, Azerbaijan launched a lightning campaign to reclaim Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey provided vital support, from strategic advice to the supply of military drones that had already proven their worth in Ukraine. During this offensive, Russian soldiers in the region took no meaningful action in Armenia's defense, leading to profound dissatisfaction among Armenian leaders. As a result, some Armenian officials called for Russia to withdraw its troops, and there were even calls for Armenia to leave the CSTO. From Turkey's viewpoint, aiding Azerbaijan not only broke a long-standing stalemate in the Caucasus but also expanded Ankara's reach into the broader Turkic world. In a striking statement, officials in Azerbaijan declared that Turkey's army was effectively an extension of their own. This cooperation laid the foundation for what many commentators have dubbed a Turkic corridor, connecting Azerbaijan with several Central Asian countries historically within Russia's sphere of influence. Even the personal rapport between Presidents Erdogan and Putin does not obscure the strategic reality that Turkey often acts as an assertive challenger to Russia's interests. The key factor enabling Turkey to do so without incurring overwhelming retribution is the Bosporus Strait, which serves as the only maritime outlet for Russian vessels from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Historically, at least 3 of the 10 major Russo-Turkish wars revolved around control of this passage. In modern times, it remains crucial to Russia's trade. Some 15% of Russian oil production and a large share of its grain exports pass through the strait daily, with a total value exceeding $200 million. Militarily, the 1936 Montreux Convention empowers Turkey to restrict naval transit in times of conflict, granting it substantial strategic leverage. For example, early in a major conflict, Turkey can block the movement of additional Russian warships into the Black Sea, forcing them to remain in the Mediterranean for extended periods. By virtue of its NATO membership and its dominance over the Bosporus, Turkey has felt secure enough to challenge Russia repeatedly, whether in Syria, Azerbaijan, or Ukraine, while avoiding a large-scale Russian military response. For Moscow, maintaining a working relationship with Turkey often appears to be the only pragmatic choice. Turning from Russia to the United States, Turkey's stance reflects a similar emphasis on autonomy. Historically, Turkey was a key ally for the U.S. in the Middle East, boasting NATO's second-largest army. Yet since President Erdogan took office, and particularly after the failed coup in 2016, attributed in large part to dissatisfaction within secular ranks of the military, Turkey has steadily diverged from America's preferred policies. The aftermath of the coup featured an extensive purge of pro-Western officials and officers. Erdogan justified these measures by alleging external influence and asserting a need to safeguard Turkey's sovereignty, while also pointing to perceived Western sympathies for anti-government factions. Significantly, Russia's President Putin was the first world leader to express support for Erdogan following the coup attempt, and some reports suggest Putin shared intelligence that helped Erdogan address the internal threat. Shortly thereafter, relations between Turkey and Russia improved. Against this backdrop, a separate clash emerged between Turkey and the U.S. when America declined to sell Patriot missile systems to Ankara. In retaliation, Turkey procured the Russian-made S-400 defense system, inviting economic and military sanctions from Washington. The U.S. even expelled Turkey from the F-35 fighter jet program. However, these actions did little to deter Turkey's independent approach, as deep-seated policy disagreements over Syria had long since strained the relationship. Initially, both Turkey and the U.S. opposed the Syrian government, but American strategy shifted to arming Kurdish groups to combat ISIS, an extremist entity that had rapidly expanded. This initiative alarmed Ankara, given that Kurdish forces in Syria share close ties with Kurdish populations in Turkey, concern for Turkish leaders wary of secessionist movements on their own territory. Compounding tensions was the claim that Turkey had, at various points, turned a blind eye to or even indirectly benefited from ISIS's black market oil operations, which offered a temporary counterweight to the forces Turkey deemed most threatening. As the U.S. redirected its focus to eliminating ISIS, cooperation between Turkey and the U.S. in Syria eroded, culminating in a formal break in their alliance there. Under the Biden administration, Turkey's policies continued to generate unease in Washington. The relationship began to thaw, however, when former President Trump re-emerged in American politics and engaged with Erdogan. A high-profile phone call led to signals of rapprochement, prompting Turkey's foreign minister to visit Washington for discussions on lifting sanctions and resuming cooperation on advanced military technology, such as the F-35. Turkey's unique diplomatic position, maintaining workable ties with Putin, while also keeping channels open to Ukraine-enabled Erdogan to act as a go-between in wider ceasefire negotiations. When Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov met U.S. Secretary of State Rubio on February 18, Ukrainian representatives also visited Ankara, illustrating Turkey's potential as a mediator. In Europe, Turkey's ambitions have long been focused on possible EU membership. Yet the EU accession process, underway since 2005, remains stalled, with 16 of the 35 negotiation chapters yet to be closed. European authorities frequently cite Turkey's shortfalls in democracy, human rights, unresolved territorial disputes, and economic reforms. For years, Turkey had minimal leverage and was forced to tolerate European criticism. That dynamic changed drastically when Turkey gained a powerful bargaining chip in the form of refugees fleeing wars in the Middle East. In 2015, European leaders, notably the then German Chancellor, sought Turkey's assistance in controlling the flow of millions of Syrian refugees heading toward Europe. Turkey agreed to contain these migrants in return for financial aid. €3 billion was the widely reported figure in commitments to fast-track visa liberalization and expedite EU accession negotiations. From that point on, the refugee crisis became a pivotal element of Turkey's dealings with Europe. When Ankara felt the EU was not honoring its promises, it briefly opened its borders in early 2020, allowing tens of thousands of refugees to cross into Greece in a single day. This move led to a state of emergency along Europe's borders and forced EU officials to revisit Turkey for urgent talks. Although Turkey's democratic and human rights record came under sporadic European criticism, most leaders stopped short of imposing harsh measures, wary of risking a breakdown of the already tenuous refugee agreement. Turkey's geographical importance further strengthens its hand with Europe. Controlling the sole conduit from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean grants Ankara power over energy corridors and significant shipping routes. While the EU once used the promise of membership as its main incentive, protracted disputes and Turkey's newfound confidence have rendered that mechanism far less persuasive. Although certain European voices highlight issues like democratic decline, tensions with Greece, and structural economic concerns within Turkey, these critiques lack the impact they once had. Economic, security, and refugee-related interests all press upon Europe to maintain a functional, if uneasy, partnership with Ankara. Central to Turkey's evolving strategy is the redefinition of its national identity. The Kemalist vision emphasizing a strictly Western orientation has gradually given way to a more flexible approach that balances multiple affiliations. This shift is commonly referred to as Neo-Ottomanism, reflecting a renewed assertion of Turkey's historical legacy as a prominent regional power. The goal of achieving significant global influence by 2053 is more than an idle boast. It informs the country's foreign policy practice. Turkey can present itself as a democratic, secular ally to Western nations, appeal to shared Turkic ties in Central Asia and the Caucasus, and highlight Islamic heritage when engaging with Muslim-majority countries, all while leveraging this multifaceted image for strategic gain. President Erdogan's dual-track tactics dovetail with this fluid identity. Every international gambit that yields success, whether arms deals, strategic alignments, or direct military action, bolsters Erdogan's domestic standing. In turn, his strengthened position at home grants him latitude to pursue further assertive moves abroad. This cycle has fostered Turkey's independent posture, one that no longer aligns strictly with either Washington or Moscow, nor is it wholly reliant on European integration. Of all the strategic tools at Turkey's disposal, perhaps none is as decisive as its control of the Bosporus Strait. A historical focal point in Russo-Turkish wars, the Bosporus remains indispensable to Russia's commercial and naval operations. Each day, massive quantities of oil and grain head from the Black Sea into global markets through this corridor. Meanwhile, the Montreux Convention allows Turkey to bar or limit warships from transiting the strait under certain conditions. This arrangement gives Turkey tremendous leverage, something it has not hesitated to use, whether by preventing foreign warships from entering the Black Sea or by allowing them passage when it suits Ankara's interests. Recent events underscore the Bosporus' continuing strategic importance. During the Syrian conflict, Turkey selectively restricted maritime access while supplying opposition groups. More recently, the blocking of additional Russian naval vessels highlighted how Turkey's dominion over this narrow waterway can influence outcomes on the regional stage. Despite risking antagonism, Turkey has proceeded with these measures to assert its independence and expand its influence. Through such maneuvers, Turkey balances relations with Russia, the United States, and Europe. This balancing act is not without peril. Critics point out that Turkey's shifting positions can appear inconsistent, raising questions about whether they stem from a coherent long-term vision or a simpler opportunism. Evidence suggests, however, that Turkey's approach is rooted in a deep understanding of its strategic assets, including geography, a robust military, and a public attuned to historical and nationalistic narratives. Domestic politics and foreign policy are intricately intertwined, enabling leadership to rally popular support for moves that might otherwise seem risky. In looking to the future, Turkey's ambition exceeds short-term gains. With the Neo-Ottoman concept as a guide, it seeks to expand its clout so that it is recognized not just regionally but also on the international stage. This entails simultaneously engaging with multiple global powers, extracting benefits from each without committing fully to any alliance. It is a delicate dance that has, so far, yielded tangible dividends. While NATO, the EU, the United States, and Russia may all have reservations about Turkey's unpredictability, each also recognizes Ankara's indispensable role in matters ranging from security to commerce. The implications of Turkey's trajectory are far-reaching. Its partial disengagement from a strictly Western orientation may stress alliances such as NATO. Meanwhile, its willingness to employ geographical advantages including control over the Bosporus Strait existing assumptions about power distribution in the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, and beyond. This development aligns with a worldwide shift toward multipolarity, where competing hubs of influence increasingly replace the old unipolar or bipolar structures. There are, of course, inherent risks. Turkey's maneuvering could produce a backlash from powerful adversaries, or missteps could lead to domestic upheaval. So far, however, Turkey's arsenal of strategic assets, military capacity, trade routes, and carefully managed diplomacy has allowed it to navigate a volatile international landscape. The current situation underscores the paradoxical nature of Turkey's foreign policy. A state long regarded as peripheral to Western-led frameworks is proving that it can reshape regional and global power dynamics. Moves in Syria, a delicate balancing act between Russia and the US, and the adroit use of refugee flows in negotiations with Europe all reflect a calculated strategy aimed at elevating Turkey's position on the world stage. This effort draws on a reimagined national identity that merges historical prestige with practical diplomacy. For the international community, Turkey's example underscores how, in a complex world, power can derive from a blend of heritage, geography, and opportunistic yet deliberate statecraft. Turkey's multifaceted approach defies easy categorization, forcing long-standing alliances to evolve or adapt. Observers will watch closely to see whether Ankara can fulfill its aim to become a truly global actor by 2053, and how this ambition will influence its relations with dominant powers. Ultimately, Turkey's path exemplifies the capacity of a nation to transcend former constraints. It can engage with Russia in one conflict while cooperating with the United States in another, or it can negotiate with Europe on one issue while defying it on another. Whether deploying drones to conflict zones, negotiating energy routes, or managing large refugee populations, Turkey consistently demonstrates its readiness to leverage every advantage. Such a course inevitably raises questions about stability. Nonetheless, Turkey's willingness to operate beyond traditional alignments shows a nuanced grasp of the emerging multipolar environment. In an era when shifting alliances and overlapping spheres of influence are the norm, Ankara's capacity to exploit its assets from controlling key maritime passages to navigating ideological divisions may well offer a template for other mid-sized powers with grand ambitions. As it stands, Turkey's future seems bound to this delicate yet forceful strategy. The outcome remains uncertain, but the nation's recent history offers clues to its evolving identity and goals. A deeper examination of its maneuvers reveals a country determined to be neither wholly Western nor Eastern, neither fully aligned with nor entirely alienated from global powers. Instead, Turkey seeks to chart a distinctive course, reinforcing its domestic political structure while reshaping its role in the world. These developments highlight a broader transformation of the international system. Power is no longer concentrated in a few traditional centers but is increasingly dispersed among states capable of leveraging historical, cultural, or geographic particularities. Within this landscape, Turkey occupies a critical space, challenging assumptions about how emerging powers can position themselves amid competing influences. It remains to be seen whether Turkey's pursuit of a neo-Ottoman vision can be reconciled with the complexities of modern global governance. The balancing act may grow more difficult as external pressures mount or as internal politics shift. Even so, the skill with which Turkish leaders have so far navigated these tensions indicates that the country's influence is likely to continue expanding. The story of Turkey's recent foreign policy is one of paradox and complexity. A nation once viewed primarily through the lens of its Western alliances has, through a fusion of historical gravitas and strategic maneuvering, positioned itself to shape regional and potentially global outcomes. Its interventions in Syria, its dual approach to Russia and the United States, and its leveraging of refugee movements in negotiations with Europe all reflect calculated moves to redefine Turkey's place in the world. Underlying these shifts is an evolving national identity that sees Turkey not as an appendage to any external power structure, but as a self-reliant force embodying both its Ottoman heritage and modern ambitions. As this evolution unfolds, it illuminates broader principles of international relations in an era defined by fluid alignments. Military capacity, economic leverage, and ideological appeal interweave, with no single factor guaranteeing success. Turkey's path demonstrates the efficacy of adapting to multiple audiences, employing robust state power, and maintaining a posture flexible enough to gain advantage yet firm enough to protect core national interests. Observers will continue debating whether Turkey's neo-Ottoman aspirations can be fully realized by 2053, how its rapport with powers like Russia and the US will evolve, and whether the EU accession process has any future relevance. For now, the best indicator is Turkey's track record each time a challenge presents itself, be it the Syrian conflict, disputes within NATO, energy competition, or migration crises. Turkey responds in a manner that expands its own autonomy and significance. Through all these maneuvers, Turkey challenges long-standing assumptions about alliances, ideology, and regional hierarchies. As the world edges toward a more multipolar arrangement, Turkey's trajectory underscores the importance of adaptability, cultural resonance, and control over strategic resources. The lines between friend and adversary, ally and competitor, continue to blur, and Turkey has proved adept at navigating this ambiguity to its own advantage. In today's climate, where traditional alliances can shift overnight and new coalitions emerge from necessity rather than shared ideals, Turkey's comprehensive approach stands out. By blending its historical identity with the imperatives of modern governance, Ankara has forged a path that keeps it central to diplomatic, military, and economic discussions across multiple regions. Its example serves as both a caution and a guidepost. Other nations, particularly those with strong historical legacies and strategic locations, may draw lessons from Turkey's willingness to challenge entrenched power structures and from its simultaneous engagement with disparate partners. Whether this model ultimately fosters long-term stability or breeds additional competition remains an open question. Nevertheless, Turkey's ascent as a shaper of international affairs appears poised to continue. The final outcome will depend on numerous variables: internal political dynamics, the strategic calculations of major powers, and unforeseen global crises. Yet, Turkey's track record suggests it will remain a pivotal actor. It has already demonstrated considerable resilience, capitalizing on each opportunity to fortify its regional and international standing. By deftly interweaving domestic nationalism with external diplomacy, it continues to push the boundaries of what a mid-sized power can achieve on the world stage. In conclusion, Turkey's strategic journey exemplifies how a nation can simultaneously leverage history, geography, and diplomacy to redefine its global role. The interplay of identity, alliances, and resource management illuminates a broader shift in international relations, where influence is distributed among states able to combine economic might, cultural resonance, and strategic positioning. The outcome of Turkey's evolving policies will have significant ramifications not only for its immediate neighbors, but also for the broader international community. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel.